I flew down the stairs, but all front and back doors were locked, and I began to check the first floor windows, and looking out the last window by the front door I saw Mr. Williams from across the street. He was standing there talking to someone that had stopped in the street. He had lived here all his life and he knew everyone that had lived in the house. I could ask him about the house. I went out the front door and, trying to hold myself in check, I walked down our front walkway, now starting to believe what I knew must be the truth. The car was driving off and he was turning to go back inside. Trying not to break out into a flat-out run, I walked faster. He was just starting in, and a small plane flew over. He turned to look up at the plane. I was almost to the sidewalk, and I called out, "Mr. Williams," and waved to him. He stopped and looked at me and waved back. He stopped and waited for me, and when I had crossed the street I started to talk to him. "Good morning, Mr. Williams. This is really a beautiful day, huh?" He responded, "Call me Brian, we're neighbors now." "Okay, Brian. This is a really interesting house, it has a lot of character. You said yesterday that the first family that lived in the house had 3 children, a boy and 2 girls. Do you know where they moved to?" He kind of looked down and then back up to me and said that they moved away, but didn't know where after Mr. Hinton went into work one day and shot himself in the head. He had moved here from Detroit and was working at the Chevrolet dealership. By that time he had become the assistant general manager, and one day went into his office and shot himself. It was very sad. He was so upset after having lost his son. Lost his son? How did he lose his son? I asked. The family had went to the church picnic, and Vernon, that was the boy's name, was beat to death by a robber. Everyone was at the picnic since it was the 4th of July, but Vernon didn't come with the family. He was kind of a homebody, if you know what I mean. I shook my head and questioned, "Homebody?" He took a deep breath and said, "You know, kind of a sissy boy." He looked at the ground and then continued, "Well, when the family came home they found him in his room, and, oh, it was just horrible. All 4 of them came running over here, and my father and him went back. You see, we were at the picnic also. Well, my father grabbed his shotgun, and the both of them went back over there, and found the boy beat to death. My father had said it was horrible. His head had been busted open, and all his brains were spilled all over the floor. Well, the police came, and the ambulance took what was left of the poor boy. And Mr. Hinton, oh well, he was in an awful state. That was the only boy he had, and he had such high hopes for him. The boy just never measured up to his expectations, but that didn't stop the 2 of them. They went every place together. Mr. Hinton never missed one of the boys' activities at the high school. Football, basketball, baseball, they both attended them. He blamed himself, you see, for not making the boy come to the picnic. Well, after the funeral, it was a closed casket affair since the boy was beat so bad. It was a downright shame. He just couldn't go on, and went into work, and pulled out a .38 revolver, and splattered his brains all over a picture of the new 1972 Chevrolet Camaro that was just coming out the next year. You say that this happened on July 4th, 1971, do you know Vernon's birthday? I asked. Now let me think. Yeah, it was the 14th of June, said Brian. So that would have made him 18 just like me, I muttered to myself aloud. Brian continued, kind of talking to himself as well as to me. As a matter of fact, since thinking back on it now, we both had our birthday parties together that year. You see, my birthday is on the 18th of June, so we just combined them and had a big blowout. We had fireworks and shot them off back behind your house since there were no houses built over there yet. They had just put in the foundations, and you could walk directly from back there right up to your house. He stopped and took out an handkerchief and wiped his head and asked, "Hey, it's getting kind of hot out here. Why don't you come in and you can have some lemonade and meet my wife? We hardly ever get out anymore, and I'm sure that she would like to meet one of our new neighbors." I said thank you and followed him up to his house, and we went inside. Going into the kitchen, he called out, "Lily, we have company." A lady came in off of the back porch saying that she was just out hanging out the wash. Brian introduced me to his wife. "I'm sorry, I don't remember your name?" "My name is James," I reminded him. "Oh yeah, that's right, I remember now. Well, James, this is my wife Lily, and we've been married for 47 years now." Lil, James was asking about Vernon and asking his hot work, and I told him that we could get some lemonade. His wife was very sweet, and even though a bit on the heavy side, she pulled 3 tall glasses out of the cupboard, and pulling out a large pitcher of iced lemonade from the refrigerator set it down on the table, and then poured out a glass for each of us. When I took mine, I noticed they were jelly jars, and I felt right at home. She sat down saying, "It is so hot being late June, now what did you want to know about Vernon?" I lied, and told her that I was just looking online about Jacksonville since we had just moved here, and I found some pictures of newspaper clippings, but the text was all faded and way too small to read. I then brought her up to speed on what Brian and I had been talking about. Brian pitched in that Lil was a Vernon expert, and she added in that she had him in a few classes back in high school, and even went to the prom with him. She mentioned that most of the boys didn't like him, but all the girls thought he was very cute and very well-mannered. Then she added that she even had some pictures of him, and she jumped up and went out of the kitchen very quickly. Brian continued after she left the room, "Well-mannered meant he was kind of a sissy boy like I told you. He never went hunting or fishing, and he knew nothing about sports." Lil came back in and sat down and opened up a large photo album. She flipped through a bunch of pages and said, "Oh, here it is," and showed me a picture of a much thinner Lil standing beside a boy with wavy hair dressed in an oversized sports coat with a banner behind them saying Senior Prom 1971. She said that was in May of 1971. I mentioned that she was taller than him, and she responded, "Oh, that was because of my heels, the first pair that I ever wore." She took the picture back, and looking at it said, "I do look taller than him, but he wasn't very tall." Brian chuckled and added, "And he won't get any taller either." Lil and him both laughed at each other, and she playfully slapped his forearm. I knew that I was looking at my parents in 20 years. She told me that there was just something about him, all the girls liked him, and he seemed to like the girls, but, well, I don't know, he just seemed to not be like the other boys, and that bothered some of the boys, and fathers as well. I know my daddy didn't care for him. Brian then again added, "That's because he was a sissy boy." I stood in Brian, and Lil walked me to the door. I thanked them for the lemonade, and for the indulgence of their time, and asked another question. What was the name of the 2 sisters that owned the house before we moved in? "It is Marston," they both said almost in unison, and then Lil added, "Janet and Janice Marston. Janice was the one that died, and Janet is the one in the assisted living home, Golden Glow Assisted Living. I go see her every Monday. I bring her word search puzzle books." I then asked, "Are you going to go this Monday?" and she said that she was, and I asked her if I could ride along. I'd like to talk to her. She told me that I could, and that she usually left sometime around 9 a.m. Well, I thanked them again, and went back to my house. I went back to my room, and looked at the dress laying on the bed next to the shoes. A thought was forming in my mind. I looked at the time, and saw it was just a little past 1 p.m., and I called my mom asking how the car shopping was going. She said that they had just left the first dealership, and was heading to the second one, and added that they should be back in about 2 or 3 hours. I inquired if Dad was liking what he had found so far. With a chuckle, she replied that he was like a kid in a candy store. "Well, you can take your time, I'm going to be laying down and taking a nap." After hanging up, I went back down to the basement to change the clothes from the washer to the dryer, and saw that one wall was painted different than the other ones. It was an old washed-out white. Right by the end of it there were old pencil marks that was scratched into the paint. There was the name of Vernon, and the date, 1964, and it was 4 feet 5 inches, then following the years up to 1970 it stopped at 5 feet 6 inches, then there were no more height marks, and also at that mark was the date 1971. So Vernon was 5 feet 6 inches tall, the same height as me, I thought. I went back up to my room, stopping by the bathroom to deposit some of the lemonade that I had been drinking. I stood at the foot of the bed, and let me say now I don't know why I did what I did, but I removed my clothes except for my boxers and stepped into the dress the way I had seen ladies on TV put on a dress. I pulled it up to my shoulders, and realized that the dress didn't have a zipper or buttons, rather it had elastic sewed into the waist. There were little, well, I don't know what you call them, but they held the dress up on your shoulders. I pulled it up my body, and guided my arms under the little straps, pulled it up the rest of the way until it was over my shoulders. I smoothed down the skirt part, and tried to pull it down, but the waist seemed higher than what it should be. I realized that it must be because girls had a higher waist than boys do. I stepped in front of the mirror, and at first, thought I looked totally ridiculous, but in the next fleeting moment I seemed, now I don't know how to describe just how I felt, but it was more of relaxed and softer feeling. I know that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it was a feeling, and how do you put some feelings into words? But something wasn't right, it was incomplete. Of course the shoes, so I took the shoes off of the bed, and put them on the floor. I bent down, and when I did, the skirt of the dress obscured the shoes, so I had to work on putting them on by feel. My foot went into the right shoe, and when I used my finger to guide the shoe over my heel, it seemed to fit just perfect. With the left shoe I gathered the skirt, and laying that over my thigh I could see the shoe, and with my left finger guided my heel into the shoe. I stood and they both seemed to fit almost perfect. I turned, and looked back into the mirror, and I looked totally different. This time I had makeup on, my hair was still just past my ears, but there was a little pink bow-shaped beret on each side of my head. My legs had changed as well, and were covered in white stockings. I began to turn, or let me say the reflection began to turn. I know my body never moved. My face, or the face in the mirror, had a delighted, delicate smile. I didn't think I was smiling, and suddenly the face in the mirror lost the smile, and I know I didn't turn, but I was turning. A loud booming voice was yelling and echoing in my head. I followed, turning, but wait, that's not right, I wasn't turning at all, but through my vision, I was turning, and there was a huge man dressed in a dark shirt with no collar. He had dark, very short hair. He was walking very quickly in the room carrying a piece of steel rod about a half an inch in diameter, and about 2 feet long. The voice booming in my head chilled me to my soul and made me shake. "You goddamn prissy boy. I've tried to break you of wearing girls' clothes, and now I'm going to do just that." I could feel my voice leave my body, but it wasn't my voice. "Oh please daddy, don't. I promise I won't ever do it again. Oh daddy. Please don't." I could see him swing. I could feel the steel hit my neck, but I knew when it was happening, that it was not happening to me. I flew to the floor, and the huge Hulk standing over me, and he swung again, and this time he hit my head. The sharp pain coursed through my brain, and now the Hulk was only visible through one eye. There were blood splatters on his shirt, and he pulled the metal demise to the other side, and with a backhand swing delivered a strike on my forehead. I was trying to talk, but not making any sense, and not verbally issuing any words, but just blabbering sounds. There was another strike from the other side, and my sight became blackness, which was broken up by strike after strike until there was only blackness. No longer any noise, sight, feeling, or pain, there was nothing. Just nothing. Light flooded my eyes, making me blink at the brightness, and my focus finally coming together on the figure reflecting in the mirror. The figure was once again smiling, but now it wasn't delighted, it was much more sinister. Then the blackness came over me once more.